Hi everyone, this is Ashley with CTandRina Digitals. I'm going to do a tutorial to show you how to use my new Box Me and beauty backdrops in Photoshop. I wasn't sure what to call these at first. At first I was going to call them TriCanvas, which is why the file names are TriCanvas, because they're pretty much made with triple canvases and a floor. I actually made these in my studio, and I have a couple different variations. I made one with kind of more of a hanging canvas backdrop in the back, and then I have a couple more that are similar, but they're going to be some darker tones and then some lighter tones, and they're going to be a little bit more boxy than the hanging ones, but each and every single one is a different color, and also each and every one is a different texture, so you can maintain that consistency in your portfolio, but there's lots of different options to choose from. Before I jump into the edit, I'm just going to do one edit. I picked a harder one just to show you how to blend. This tool can be really hard to blend into backdrops, so I'm going to do this one. But if you have a backdrop that you're like, oh, I really like the texture on this one, but I don't like the color, it's very simple to change the color on any of them. You can just add a hue saturation layer above the backdrop, and you can just drag your hue slider to select a different color. If it's too much, too pink, you can always desaturate. You drag that way, then as you can see, they're a lot more of a muted color, and you can go down as far as you need to. Any of them you can obviously turn into gray or black just by adding the black and white adjustment layer in Photoshop. Same thing with this one. If you wanted a different color on there, you could just slide it, or if you wanted a gray instead of a beige, you could just add that black and white layer on there. Okay, so I'm going to get into my edit, and as always when you're doing digital backdrops, it is always best to shoot for the digital backdrop you are using. So if you have a backdrop in mind that you're going to want to be using, try to use similar colors. Obviously you can pick afterwards and find one that best matches and tweak it a little bit, but it's always easier to find one that matches a little bit better. This one's going to be a little tricky because I'm putting her on a red background, and she's wearing red, but the background is brown. So first I'm going to go ahead and I want to work in the same proportion. So I know my digital backdrops are a 2:3 ratio, and this is not. So I'm going to go ahead and crop it in first. Just go ahead and type up here 2:3 into there, and then adjust to how you want it to crop down. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and go to my quick selection tool and go up to select subject. Okay, and make sure that it's selected pretty good. There's a lot of the dress down here that wasn't, so I'm just going to use my plus and minus tools up here to just get rid of anything I need to. If you want, you can zoom in. You can correct this all later, but this crown is a little bit of a pain in the butt. I'm probably not going to do the full edit on the crown in the tutorial because it can take a while just to paint on and paint off all these areas, but I just want to get these stars. I know these stars are a pain in the butt when I do edits like this. As selected best I can. Now it's just gonna, alright, I'm just gonna zoom out here. Like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect because you can always go back in later, but you want it as close as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate my layer. I'm going to create a layer mask, and then I'm going to come over to the digital that I'm wanting to use. I'm going to select all, edit and copy, and edit and paste into my image. You can also, and then resize. You can also file and place embedded if you like to do it that way, which I do a lot of the time, but I already had this open. So okay, so as you can see, I place it a little bit outside of my subject photo, just because if I add blur, sometimes it can make the edges kind of wonky. So I just crop it out a little bit further than where it needs to be. And then I'm going to drag it right below the layer of my subject. Now she doesn't line up, so I'm going to click back on her, and I'm going to grab that layer, and I'm just going to move her down. And another thing you can see is the light is coming from the opposite direction. I do highly recommend flipping the backdrop and not the subject, because if this is obviously for your client, because if you flip them, their features are going to be off. So I can flip my backdrop. I didn't before I flipped my subject, but you would flip it that way. I'm actually going to go back because I'm used to editing from, I'm going to flip her for this one. But as I said, I recommend actually not doing that for your client galleries. So I'm going to resize her. I want her to be, so these backdrops are probably roughly like, I'm not like 7 feet maybe, I'm not sure. And in real life in the studio, maybe they're 7 or 8, but size them. You don't want them too small because that doesn't really look realistic. You don't want them too big because then they're going to look giant compared to the backdrop. You want a good height above their head. Say like about that is good. Okay, and you can play around with that a little bit till you get it how you want it. I'm actually going to move her a little bit more this way. Okay. Now that I have the lighting matching, so one way it's helpful to shoot on the same colors is I can, instead of trying to add in all the shadows individually, I can go on my mask for my subject and with my white brush, because I'd be brushing her back on, because remember this was initially on that backdrop. So I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to brush back on the original floor, and you want to be careful that you're not erasing like this. So if you press X on your keyboard, you can go back and forth between black. See, when you do that, it's going to completely take away that dress. So if you just go to your history and just go back that way. I didn't want to brush off that far over. So I'm going to go back, try to feather it out the best you can without getting rid of things you don't want. And then we're going to make this floor darker too. But as you can see, the texture is even somewhat the same on this one, and the tone is similar. Okay, so now I'm going to create, all right, there's already a layer mask on her, sorry. I'm going to go into my brush and make it smaller, 100% opacity, because I want to just get rid of, so you're going to want to use a black brush here because you're brushing off of her, the hard lines around her gown. And then I'm going to brush on a color on hard light to try to get these edges to blend into the backdrop. Like I said, this is a little bit harder of an edit. Obviously, if you don't have as much, I'm going to bring this opacity down just a little bit to feather some of these in. If you don't have as much to blend like this and you're not dealing with tulle and you have more fine edges, it's going to be easier for you. If you already know how to do this, you can just fast forward to this part. But a lot of people have trouble blending. Just going to go around the whole image, or at least around her whole dress. I need to bring down the brightness on her as well, because I think she's a little bit brighter than my backdrop. Sometimes I'll even brush off part of the gown if it doesn't make sense where it's lying on the backdrop. And my work probably isn't going to be absolutely perfect. I try to make it as quick as I can for tutorial sake. Okay, we're going to go back to that. We're just finishing up around the dress for now. this is just getting rid of that hard edge. That's it. I'm not really erasing too much of the gown. This part would blend in with the backdrop if it was the same color. And I'm doing a very quick job of it. You may be able to. Okay, and then see while I'm up here, her arm needs brushed in right there. So I'm just going to do that now. I'm going to use a smaller brush, smaller white brush, because we're brushing her back in. And just brush her arm back in here. You may have to brush on and brush off a couple times. Okay, this probably makes it look so much more extensive. Okay, so I'm gonna bring down, I'm gonna add a curves layer above her. And I'm gonna make sure to take that clipping mask and I'm gonna drag that down a little just to make her a little bit darker, because these dark tones down here in the floor, she didn't quite match, and I didn't do too much. Okay, and then I'm going to click on her layer. I'm going to add a new layer. I'm going to put it on hard light. Zoom in, and I'm going to take a brush and I'm going to hold down my Alt key and I'm going to select some of that red color. And now that was really dark, so we don't want to do 100%. Let's start out at 25. Go ahead and brush around. As you can see, that's helping to blend the edge of her dress. And I don't want to do it just on the very edge because I want it to blend in all the way around. And this is how I do it. There's multiple ways to do it. I use multiply sometimes too, but I've found, that hard light works a lot better sometimes. Okay, it's good for now. As you can see, that helped a lot, and it brought down all, I'm gonna do up here too on her shoulder. Okay, so now I'm gonna go back to her mask and brush off some of that floor again, because I think I brushed more of it on at some point. And now I'm on 25%, so I'm just brushing it in little by little. Okay. And now I want to create a layer above my backdrop. And I'm going to put that on multiply blending mode. And I'm going to, you can either hold down Alt on your keyboard and click between those layers, or you can right click and create clipping mask. And we need to create some shadows. So I'm going to grab my brush at about 25% opacity. First, I'm going to grab the red, hold down Alt on your keyboard, grab that dark red, and paint in some of that shadow there. And then I'm going to grab a dark brown over here, and I'm going to paint in the shadow down here, because this is all going to be in the shadows because of how the light is falling. Her body is going to create that shadow. And now we can create a layer above her on multiply blending mode and click that brown layer again, and we can add in that shadow on her layer as well. I'm going to go back in to her mask, and I'm going to use a smaller brush, again only about 25% opacity, and I'm going to brush off even more of that original layer. And then if you brush off, I'm going to come back over 100% opacity, white brush, and just brush her toes back on here. Oops. So we obviously don't want to brush her toes off. Okay. Okay, so now you can see we have all the shadows that we need from her feet, but we also have our new floor down there. We added in the shadows for the background. And then after you add in shadows for the background, if you need to go in again and add more darkness to your outside of your dress, you can, or you can just simply go to your mask and use a low percentage of opacity, about 20%. Black, and then kind of just lightly brush off some of those edges so they blend some more. Okay, and now in the background layer and any adjustments that I did to it, I'm going to click all of those and merge those ones together. And now, so for the crown, I'm not going to do the whole thing because we would be here all day. But all you would have to do is just like any other part. So you would have to go around the whole edge of her body, just make sure that everything is in there. See, there's parts of her finger that I need to brush back in, but you do everything on her mask. It would be black to brush off and red or white to brush on. So if I need to, 100% opacity here. So black to brush it off there. And then use X to switch between and white to brush it on, to touch up those edges for everything. Oops. And then I would just have to very tediously go around and brush all this off. You could probably also come over to just her layer. Let me see, I don't usually do this. And use your quick selection tool and select parts in there. That's not gonna do. And you could press delete, but as you can see, that doesn't do the best job either. So whatever you want to do, I usually just take the time to brush it off of the image. Go back to that mask. And then white, see the stars I was telling you about? They can be a pain in the butt because you have to kind of guess where they are to brush them back on, and then you have to brush the background back in. It can be very tedious. But I'm going to do a very quick job of this. I'm not going to make it look perfect by any means. You can fill in all this. This crown is from Modest Little Me. I have two of them. I use them for Mommy and Me and maternity. Okay, so I would go around and fill all that in. And then when you were done with that, when you're done doing all of your adjustments, you would go down to your background, go ahead and duplicate the layer, go up to fill, because this background is pretty sharp right now behind your subject. And you don't want that. You want it to blur just a tiny bit, so because it's to create that depth of field. So you're going to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, just to anywhere from like 1.5 to 2. 2 will be good. And then create a layer mask. And use a black brush at 100% opacity just to brush it off of that field that your maternity model is standing on. Okay, and then after I add the blur, I like to flatten. And then I zoom in and I kind of go around the image and see if I need to blend anything. I usually use my healing tool for that, and I kind of just blend in any shadows I feel like need fixed. Or if there was anything I missed, I can still go back. But like I didn't really touch her hair, but there's kind of like a wonky piece of hair right there. You could go and use your clone tool and fix that real quick. Or you could just grab your blur tool. I do this quite often. And just add a little bit of blur right to that edge, and it gets rid of that. Would, again, fix that all up before you flatten your image. If there's any tool that looks like it needs fixed up, I'd maybe make it a little bit darker down around here, but excuse me. Before and after. And then if I go back, if you wanted to do anything to your backdrop, like say I did all this and I'm like, I kind of want the the canvas to be like a little bit more like purple or red, you could just add a hue adjustment layer. Make sure you create that clipping mask, or actually hold on, before you do that, make sure you merge these so it applies to both of them. So add that hue saturation layer and create that clipping mask, and you can use this to drag it to change the whole thing, or if you were just wanting to fix the red, you could do reds and then play around with that. It's still going to change the red in here just a little, but if you only wanted it to apply to the backdrop, say like you wanted it like that, it's not much of a difference. Let's do something a little bit more dramatic. If you want like a blue or something, but you only wanted it to apply to the backdrop, all you would have to do is just take a black brush and brush it off of where you don't want it. Obviously, you're gonna have to pay attention to the edges. You would just switch to a white brush to brush it back on to there. But that's how, I'm doing a bad job at that. I have to usually zoom in for that. But that's how you can change it before you flatten your image if you decide you wanted it to do a different color. And obviously brush it off of the floor. And then once you do have it all brushed off, you can even try to change. The green looks pretty. Change the color again. So this looks like a mess now, but shows you how to blend, how to add your subject. Again, having a similar floor is going to help. If you do have a different colored floor, you can just use try to get it to at least the same shade of color. And then you could add just the floor that was onto your model, and then the rest of it was the digital. You could create a new layer on color blending mode and use your brush at 100% opacity. Like say I was trying to match a purple floor, or that was more like pink. You could just go in and brush around to try to match. You could hold down Alt, and say the floor was purple out here, you could hold down Alt on your keyboard and click that purple, and then paint in where you needed the floor to match. So it's possible, it's just more work. Nobody wants more work. If you have any questions, you can send us a message, or you can ask in the Facebook group. If you are not part of the Facebook group yet, it is linked in the description.